What if I told you that your mind is not entirely your own? What if the very thoughts that guide your decisions, shape your emotions, and define your reality aren't really yours at all? There is something lurking beneath your awareness, an unseen force, shaping your desires, your fears, your entire existence. You believe you are in control. You believe you make your own choices. But Carl Jung warned us that this is an illusion. The subconscious mind is a hidden labyrinth, one that governs your every action. And worse, it is far more dangerous than you've been led to believe. Jung spent his life studying the depths of the human psyche, and what he found terrified him. Because buried within the subconscious lies something ancient, something primal, something that, if left unchecked, can consume you entirely. Today, we unravel Jung's darkest warning. Today, we journey into the unknown. And by the end, you may never look at your own mind the same way again. Think about this. How often do you act without thinking? How often do you feel an emotion without knowing where it came from? Why do certain fears haunt you when you have no memory of why they exist? The answer lies in the subconscious mind, the vast, hidden force controlling more than 90% of your thoughts and actions. Jung described the mind as having two layers: the conscious mind, the surface, the part you are aware of, the logical voice inside your head; the subconscious mind, the deeper, more powerful layer, the realm of instincts, forgotten memories, and buried emotions. But beyond this lies something even darker. Jung introduced the concept of the collective unconscious. Unlike your personal subconscious, which holds your own fears and experiences, the collective unconscious is something much larger. It is a shared memory, an ancient force that connects all of humanity. You see, your subconscious is not just shaped by your personal life. It is influenced by the fears, traumas, and instincts of your ancestors. Memories of war, survival, and danger carried forward through generations. Jung believed this was why people experience irrational fears or recurring dreams that seem familiar, yet unexplainable. The subconscious doesn't just store your past. It stores the entire past of humanity. And if you do not learn to control it, it will control you. Now, here is where things take a terrifying turn. Jung didn't just believe the subconscious was powerful. He believed it was dangerous. Because the subconscious is not simply a storage unit for old memories. It is alive. It is active. It is constantly influencing you in ways you cannot see. Jung feared that most people were not truly in control of their lives, that their subconscious filled with fears, hidden desires, and ancient instincts was silently guiding their fate. Have you ever felt an overwhelming emotion that didn't seem rational? Have you ever been drawn to something for someone without understanding why? Have you ever sabotaged yourself, making choices you knew would harm you, but doing them anyway? Jung believed these weren't accidents. They were the unconscious mind taking control. And the worst part? Most people go their entire lives never realizing it's happening. But here's where it gets even darker. Jung discovered that sometimes the subconscious doesn't just influence you, it can consume you. He studied individuals who had completely lost their grip on reality. People who were so overtaken by their subconscious mind that they no longer had a sense of self. They became prisoners of their own unconscious thoughts. They lost control over their identity, their actions, even their morality. Jung called this possession, not in a supernatural sense, but in a psychological one. The subconscious, when ignored for too long, when left to fester in the darkness, can take over. It can create false identities. It can manifest as irrational fears, uncontrollable impulses, and even destructive behaviors. This is why some people, despite knowing what they should do, cannot break free from self-sabotage. Because deep inside, something else is pulling the strings. And the only way to escape it is to face it. Jung's greatest warning was this: if you do not make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But how do we make the unconscious conscious? How do we take back control from a force that has shaped us from birth? The answer lies in Jung's most disturbing discovery, something he called the shadow. And once you understand what it is, you will never look at yourself the same way again. There is a part of you that you refuse to see, a side you deny, suppress, and pretend does not exist. Carl Jung called it the shadow, and it is the darkest part of your subconscious mind. Your shadow holds everything you have rejected about yourself, every thought you consider shameful, every emotion you have buried, every impulse you are too afraid to admit. And here's the terrifying truth. Ignoring your shadow doesn't make it disappear. It only makes it stronger. Jung believed that the things we hate in others are actually things we fear in ourselves. Think about that. Why do some people irritate you so much? Why do certain behaviors trigger intense anger or disgust? Why do you judge others for things that have nothing to do with you? Jung's answer was simple. Because they reflect something buried inside you, something you refuse to face. This is why the most self-righteous people, those who claim to be the most moral, the most kind, the most perfect, often hiding the darkest secrets. They are not good. They are in denial. And the more you suppress your shadow, the more power it has over you. Because, make no mistake, your shadow is not passive. It does not sit quietly in the background. It is watching. It is waiting. And when the moment comes, it will take control. You believe you are in control of your actions. You believe you make rational choices. But what if I told you that the things you suppress the most are the things that control you the most? Jung discovered something terrifying. Repressed desires do not disappear. They simply hide in the subconscious and manipulate you from the shadows. Take a look at the world around you. Why do so many people project strength but secretly live in fear? Why do the loudest critics of corruption so often turn out to be corrupt themselves? Why do those who scream about virtue always seem to have the most to hide? The answer is the shadow. A person who hates weakness often does so because they secretly fear being weak. A person who condemns greed may do so because they crave power but are too afraid to admit it. A person who judges others for their desires often does so because they are ashamed of their own. Society encourages this repression. From birth, you are taught what is acceptable and what is shameful. You are told that anger is bad, that aggression is toxic, that desire is dangerous. So you bury these feelings. You suppress your natural instincts. You pretend to be something you are not. But buried emotions do not die. They wait, they build, and eventually, they explode. This is why so many people self-destruct. They spend years repressing their shadow, ignoring their true thoughts, forcing themselves into a fake version of goodness, until one day, the mask breaks. And when it does, the shadow takes control. This is why people who seem perfect often have the darkest secrets, because they spent their whole lives running from themselves. And in the end, no one outruns their shadow. What happens when you ignore the shadow? Carl Jung gave a warning so terrifying that most people refuse to hear it. He said, "The more you suppress your shadow, the more it controls you." You see, the subconscious does not care what society tells you. It does not care what you think is right or wrong. It only cares about truth. And if you try to silence it, it will make itself heard in other ways. A person who refuses to face their anger will become passive-aggressive. A person who suppresses their desires will live in frustration and guilt. A person who ignores their fears will sabotage themselves without knowing why. When the shadow is denied, it grows stronger. It twists into rage. It warps into addiction. It manifests as depression, self-destruction, and even violence. This is why people snap, not because they lost control, but because their shadow took over. The truth is, you do not get to choose whether or not to have a shadow. You only get to choose whether or not you face it. And if you do not face it, it will face you. The question is, what happens when you finally meet the darkest part of yourself? What if I told you your thoughts are not entirely your own? Your fears, your desires, Your instincts. They did not start with you. You inherited them, not from your parents, not from society, but from something far older, something buried deep within the collective unconscious of every human being. Carl Jung's most shocking discovery was this. The mind is not just personal, it is ancient. Every civilization, every culture, every human being shares the same psychological blueprints. Jung called them archetypes. They are not just ideas. They are not just symbols. They are living forces inside you. Patterns of thought, emotional instincts, ways of behaving that repeat across time. They are why every mythology tells the same stories. The hero, the wise old man, the temptress, the shadow. They exist in every legend, every religion, every civilization, and they exist in you. Archetypes are the reason you recognize characters in movies before they even speak. The self-sacrificing hero, the manipulative trickster, the corrupt ruler, the warrior seeking redemption. Why? Because your mind already knows them. You have seen them before, not just in stories,